Which books should a person read at least once in their life? The Count of Monte Cristo. It is full of strong emotions, and makes you question what is justice. I'd like to specially call out the Penguin Classics edition with a fresh translation by Robin Buzz. It's a much easier and better read than the old Victorian English translation. Either way, one of my all-time favorites. Edit, from what I know, the old Victorian English version, besides being much harder to read, also cut out bits involving sex and drugs because it went against the Victorian sensibilities of the time. When I originally read the book, I had read that version, and while I really enjoyed it, I was checking a Cliff's Notes kind of thing after every chapter to make sure I understood what I had read. When I learned about the Robin Buzz translation, which I've heard is more faithful to the original, I enjoyed it even more and without the need for a reading aid. A link on Amazon, The Count of Monte Cristo, Penguin Classics. My all-time favorite. The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. Reading plays is a great experience, plus this one is hilarious. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. No, seriously. It's a non-fiction, journal-style book about a psychiatrist, edit, neurologist, and how he dealt with the different problems, illnesses and issues, and in turn how the patients have been able to adapt and overcome the obstacles. It's very moving, not always easy or pleasant, but powerful book. Surprised to find this on here, but glad that Sacks has other people that appreciate him. Have you read any of his other books? I loved this one and am curious if there are any other you would recommend by him. Edit, thank you for all the recommendations and comments regarding the author. It is good to see his memory lives on. Crime and Punishment. The KGB used Dostoevsky as part of their training for interrogations, and it was so effective that the CIA was convinced they had developed a truth serum. He really knew how to write about the inner workings of the mind. Late edit. For those asking about the source for the KGB story, I picked that up from watching Adam Curtis. Unfortunately, I don't remember which of his documentaries it was in, but I would recommend all of his films, which can be found on YouTube. Notes from Underground is also fantastic if you want an introduction to Dostoevsky without the length of one of his regular novels. Also, The Double, A Nasty Story, and The Gambler. I love his writing, but I'm more of a novella guy myself. These texts are excellent for an afternoon's read and really warm you up to his writing style. Notes from Underground really impacted me the first time I read it. Nice try, Joe Goldberg. All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Remarque. Read this in high school while we were covering World War I in history class. This is one of those books that does an amazing job of putting you in the character's shoes to gruesome effect. Definitely worth reading. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. Great stuff. I cannot stress this enough. Get the Gregory Hayes translation. The Very Hungry Caterpillar. But he was still hungry. Gonna get in on this and mention Rainbow Fish by Marcus Pfister. I've recommended Brave New World to everyone I know. Not only does it touch on class hierarchy, which is still present in most societies, either blatantly or subtly, but the book also delves into what happens when we strive for efficiency and forget about some of the most important aspects of what makes us human. Very recommended. Seems an old book, yet, together with 1984, Fahrenheit 481, and Martian Chronicles, some current events, seems as relevant as the book's stories. Edited, I intentionally skip Arthur C. Clarke 2001, A Space Odyssey. I found it more complex than the previous ones, that are more user-friendly, /edited. Aldous Huxley is a genius and this book inspired my username. If you like Brave New World, you should read Island. He even said if people only read one of his books, it should be Island. Shit, I gotta read more than 2K books. I'm not even halfway through The Lusty Argonian Maid and now I gotta dedicate 30,000 hours on reading different books. I just read Dracula and I would strongly recommend it, in part because it's phenomenal and in part because there's a lot of irony in the fact that none of the characters know they're Dracula characters. I am halfway through Dracula and keep putting it down for long periods of time, but I will say when I pick it up it is quite addicting at the time, written in a very odd style though. The Stranger by Albert Camus, The Trial by Franz Kafka, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, all three tackle the struggle of a man and the society around him. Assault in his simple otherness and detachment from those around him. Keke in his suffocation under a society and system that is other and inexplicable to him. Finally, the story of Santiago and the society that determines he has no value. Dear readers, I would advise mixing in some less depressing books in between these three, but highly recommend them all. The Stranger changed my fucking life. Everyone should read it. r/books said to read whatever I want. East of Eden. There's a coffee shop in my town called Thou Mayest. Never have I seen so many people read John Steinbeck before than when they opened. East of Eden and 100 Years of Solitude are the two books I read annually. Both are life-changing and life-affirming. The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, very short book, but I believe everyone should read this at least once, especially adults. Every time I've read The Little Prince I've gotten something profoundly new out of it. A masterwork. Excellent choice. One of the most profound books I have ever read, and a must for anyone who ever intends to own a pet or have children. Flowers for Algernon. A lot of us had to read the abridged version in high school. If you liked it, definitely give the full edition a try. It's worth it. Not proud of this, but as I had to read this as a teenager, I fapped to the bit of his sexual experience with Faye. I was horny and we had to read the book. Yes, it was a devastating book and looking back I'm like wow, it was good, but back then I was a horny little shit and not much has changed. TBH. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. There's an unending amount of lenses to analyze the text through, and you can look at so many different issues, alienation, guilt, reproduction even, while reading. Find something new to discuss or think about every time I read. This book, the 1818 version, was such a surprise to me. Society really made this out to be a horror story, scary above all. However, it is an amazingly deep story about so many topics, and so sad. It moved me deeply, which I did not expect it would. Amazing story, 10/10 would recommend. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. My teacher wouldn't stop recommending that. I finally got it for Christmas this year but haven't started yet. The Belge are The Sun Also Rises, The Stranger. They all depress the hell out of me in different ways, so they're not frequent rereads. The Bell Jar fucks me up. Great book tone. Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. It's a murder mystery set in an Italian monastery in 1327. It's dense with historical information and over 500 pages long, and yet it manages to be a page-turner for easily 80% of the book. The remaining 20% is historically interesting if you're into that kind of thing, but can be skipped without losing much in terms of the plot. I'm on my 6th or 7th reread of it right now, and it never gets old. Hasn't this been made a movie with Sean Connery and Christian Slater? Honestly, this ain't a classic and it doesn't have the literary weight of one. No one is going to call it a literary masterpiece and it's not something you can use to impress people, but get an anthology of Calvin and Hobbes. I recommend the complete Calvin and Hobbes, which you can find on Amazon. Funny, quaint, sometimes surprisingly deep and sometimes just a reminder of the importance of friendship. This book has it all. I agree with everything except the notion that it's not a classic. It's earned that status, in my opinion. Yes. His snowman tableaus are epic. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's much better and darker than the movie. It's probably the closest imagining of what a real apocalypse would be like, with no heroes and no sense of hope. I feel this way about Blood Meridian. Especially for people who were born in the southern US, it's important to take a serious look at the romanticized history of the Wild West and American conquerors, and think about the ultimately spiritual implications of the symbols used in these. Haven't read The Road, but I read No Country for Old Men. His writing style definitely took some getting used to. I read it on my Kindle and was initially thinking I had some botched version of the book because there were no commas. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.